A businessman returns to the house where he grew up and feels the silence weighs heavier than any memory. While the new wife controls everything with a coldness masked as care, only an old maid sees what's truly happening. Guided by her silent gaze, he finds his mother hidden behind a door, and a secret that changes everything. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and let us know what city you're watching from. And now, on with the story. The roar of the Mercedes engine was still echoing in the garage when Robert Miller, 45, felt a strange tightness in his chest. It wasn't the first time he'd come home from a business trip, but this time the feeling was different. The townhouse on the Upper East Side of New York City rose before him as it always did, imposing and well-kept. But there was something in the air that made him uneasy. 3 days earlier, during a meeting in Washington, D.C., Robert had tried to call his mother, Mrs. Carmen, 78. It was a ritual he'd kept religiously for years, a daily call to see how she was, if she'd taken her medicine, if she needed anything. But the phone had just rung and rung. No answer. "She's resting," Vivian, his wife of 2 years, had explained when he called the main house line. "You know how frail she's been, Robert. The doctor said she needs a lot of rest." Robert had nodded at the time, but now, standing in the foyer of his own home, the explanation seemed thin. Mrs. Carmen always answered his calls, always. Even on the toughest days after losing his father 3 years ago, she made a point to talk to her son, even if just for a few minutes. The silence in the house was almost deafening. Robert dropped his briefcase on the marble floor and looked around. Something had changed. It took him a few seconds to pinpoint what it was. The antique sideboard that used to sit near the staircase, a piece that had been in the family for decades, was gone. In its place, a modern glass and steel table reflected the light from the crystal chandelier. "Robert, you're home early." Vivian came down the stairs with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. At 38, she maintained an impeccable elegance that had won Robert over from their first meeting at a corporate party. Her blonde hair was always perfect, her makeup flawless, her designer clothes impeccably tailored. "The meeting ended sooner than expected," he replied, accepting the kiss on the cheek she offered. "Where's my mom?" "Sleeping, of course. It's almost 10 at night, Robert. She's been keeping a very strict sleep schedule. Dr. Henry said it's crucial for her recovery." Robert frowned. "Recovery from what?" "She was fine when I left." Vivian sighed, as if explaining something obvious to a child. "Honey, your mother is getting older. Losing your father affected her deeply, more than you realize. She's been having episodes of mental confusion, constant forgetfulness. That's why I decided to make a few changes around the house to make the environment more appropriate for her age." It was then that Robert noticed other differences. The Persian rug his mother adored was gone. The burgundy velvet curtains, which she had personally chosen years ago, had been replaced by modern impersonal blinds. Even the scent of the house was different. Where there used to be the comforting smell of cinnamon and vanilla that Mrs. Carmen loved to have around, now a chemical odor of cleaning products dominated. "What are these changes, Vivian, and where are my mother's things?" "Robert, please don't turn this into a drama. I've stored everything very carefully. These are just practical changes. Your mother tripped on the rug a few times and the curtains collected too much dust and triggered her allergies. I'm taking care of her in the best way possible." Just then a figure moved discreetly in the kitchen. Joanna, 62, had worked for the Miller family for 25 years. She had watched Robert grow up, witnessed his parents' marriage, comforted Mrs. Carmen through her husband's passing, and knew every corner of that house as if it were her own. Robert saw her out of the corner of his eye and nodded. Joanna returned the greeting, but there was something different about her posture. Her shoulders were more slumped, her smile seemed forced, and she avoided Vivian's gaze in a way Robert had never seen before. "Can I see my mum?" Robert asked, heading toward the stairs. "No, Robert." Vivian's voice was sharper than she intended. "I mean, she's been a very light sleeper lately. If she wakes up now, she won't be able to get back to sleep all night. You can talk to her tomorrow morning." Robert stopped on the first step, feeling that same unease morph into something more concrete. It was his house, his mother. Why was he asking for permission? "Vivian, I'm just going up to say goodnight. I'll be quiet." Robert, I'm asking you to trust me. I've been taking care of your mother as if she were my own. Dr. Henry was very clear about the importance of rest. If you wake her now, you could set back all the progress she's made. At that moment, a strange noise echoed from upstairs, like something heavy had been dropped. Robert looked up, then at Vivian, who quickly averted her eyes. Must have been the neighbor's cat on the roof, she murmured, but her voice trembled slightly. Robert stood motionless for a few seconds, processing the situation. The noise had clearly come from inside the house, not the roof, and there was another detail that bothered him. In all the years he'd known his mother, she'd never had trouble sleeping. On the contrary, she was known for sleeping little and waking up early to take care of the house and her family. Something was deeply wrong in that house, and Robert could feel it in every fiber of his being. The question was, what exactly was happening to his mother, and why did the woman he'd married seem so determined to keep him away from her? Robert couldn't sleep. Lying next to Vivian, who breathed in a calm, controlled rhythm, he stared at the ceiling as his mind replayed every strange detail of the evening. The noise he'd heard kept echoing in his memory, as did his wife's nervous reaction. At 3 in the morning, he decided to get up. He went downstairs barefoot, careful not to make a sound. The house was plunged into darkness, but he knew every step, every hallway. He headed first to his mother's room on the ground floor near the library. The door was closed. Robert pressed his ear against the wood, trying to hear any sound of breathing or movement. Nothing. An absolute silence that made him even more uneasy. He gently tried the doorknob, but it was locked from the outside. From the outside, his mother never locked her bedroom door, and even if she did, the key would be on the inside. "Mr. Robert?" Joanna's whispered voice startled him. She emerged from the kitchen holding a cup of chamomile tea, wearing a simple robe and worn slippers. "Joanna, you scared me. What are you doing up at this hour?" The housekeeper hesitated, glancing nervously toward the stairs to make sure Vivian hadn't come down. "I haven't been able to sleep well for weeks, Mr. Robert. I have concerns." "What kind of concerns?" Joanna moved closer, lowering her voice even more. "It's about Mrs. Carmen. She's not well, Mr. Robert, and not in the way Mrs. Vivian has been saying." Robert felt his heart race. "What do you mean by that? Can I talk to you tomorrow, in private?" Joanna cast another nervous glance up the stairs. It's complicated." Before Robert could answer, the sound of footsteps echoed from the floor above. Vivian was coming down, wearing a white silk robe, her hair perfectly coiffed even in the middle of the night. "Robert, what are you two doing down here?" Her voice carried a poorly disguised tone of suspicion. "I couldn't sleep. Came down for some water," Robert lied. "And you, Joanna? Why aren't you in bed?" Joanna lowered her head, immediately assuming a submissive posture. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Vivian. I was just making some tea to help me relax. I'll go back to my room now." "Wait," Vivian approached, studying the housekeeper's face intently. "You haven't been sleeping well lately. Maybe it's time we reconsider your workload. A woman your age needs proper rest." The veiled threat was clear. Robert watched the interaction, noticing how Joanna shrank before Vivian, as if she were afraid of saying the wrong thing. "That's not necessary, ma'am. I'm fine. It was just tonight." "Let's all go back to bed then," Vivian said, smiling, but her eyes remained cold. "Robert, you have an important meeting tomorrow, don't you? You need to be rested." Robert had no meeting scheduled for the next day, but he didn't want to contradict his wife right then. There were tensions he needed to understand better before confronting anything. The next morning, he woke to the aroma of fresh coffee, but something was different. He went down for breakfast and noticed the table was set for only 2 people. "Isn't Mom having breakfast?" he asked, sitting down. "She's still sleeping. She's been waking up very late lately. Dr. Henry said it's normal at her age, especially with the new medication she's on." "What new medication?" Vivian poured coffee into his cup, avoiding eye contact. "For anxiety and depression. She's been having some difficult episodes, Robert. Sometimes she gets confused, doesn't recognize me properly. Just yesterday she called me by your first wife's name." Robert paused with the cup halfway to his lips. His first wife, Marina, had died 5 years ago in a car accident. She and his mother had been very close, and the loss had been devastating for Mrs. Carman. She really did that? Yes, and it wasn't the first time. That's why the doctor suggested she avoid situations that could confuse her further. Sudden changes in routine, too many visitors, long conversations, all of it can make her worse. Robert nodded, but a part of him questioned that explanation. His mother had always been a mentally sharp woman, even after losing her husband and daughter-in-law. She dealt with her grief, but she had never shown signs of mental confusion. "I'd like to speak with Dr. Henry," Robert said. "Of course, honey, I'll schedule an appointment for next week, but remember, he's very busy, and lately he's been making house calls because your mother refuses to leave the house." During breakfast, Robert watched Joanna move about the house. She seemed more tense than usual, avoiding being in the same room as Vivian for too long. When their eyes met, the housekeeper would quickly look away, but he could see something that looked like a silent plea for help in her eyes. After Vivian went upstairs to get ready, Robert found Joanna in the laundry room. "Joanna, I need to talk to you about my mother. Something is bothering me." The housekeeper stopped folding towels and looked around, checking if they were alone. "Mr. Robert, I don't know how to say this. Just say it however you can. Mrs. Carman. She hasn't been in her room for 2 weeks." Robert felt his blood run cold. "What do you mean she's not in her room?" "I clean all the rooms in the house, Mr. Robert. Her bed hasn't been used, the clothes. I wash are always the same few items, as if she's been wearing the same thing for days, and—" Joanna hesitated, tears welling in her eyes. "And I hear her crying at night, a soft, muffled cry, coming from somewhere in the house I can't pinpoint." Robert felt his legs go weak. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" "I tried calling you during your trip, but Mrs. Vivian said I was imagining things, that it was my age, that maybe I should look for another job if I couldn't perform my duties properly anymore. She said Mrs. Carman was fine, just going through a rough patch, and that I shouldn't bother you with an old maid's fantasies." Robert's hands were shaking. "Where do you think my mother is?" "I don't know, Mr. Robert, but I know she's in this house. Sometimes I hear her voice, very faint, like she's talking to herself, or like she's asking for help." "Why didn't you call the police?" Joanna lowered her head in shame. "Who's going to believe a housekeeper's word against the lady of the house? And Mrs. Vivian made it clear that if I said anything to anyone outside, I'd be fired immediately, and she'd make sure I couldn't get a job anywhere else. Mr. Robert, I have nowhere to go, no family. This house is all I have." Just then, they both heard the click of Vivian's heels on the stairs. Joanna quickly went back to folding towels, feigning normalcy, but her hands were trembling visibly. "When can we talk again?" Robert whispered. "Mrs. Vivian is going to the salon this afternoon. She's always gone for 2 hours on Fridays." Robert nodded and left the laundry room just as Vivian reached the kitchen. "Are you heading to the office?" "Today?" she asked, kissing his cheek. "Yes, I have a few things to wrap up." But Robert had no intention of going to the office. For the first time in years, he would cancel all his appointments. He had to find out where his mother was and what exactly was happening in his own home. The woman he had married, who had sworn to love and care for his family, was hiding something terrible, and he had a horrible feeling that every lost hour could mean something irreversible for the most important person in his life. Robert spent the entire morning at the office, unable to focus on anything. Every document he tried to read, every video conference he joined, all of it seemed irrelevant in the face of the anguish growing in his chest. Joanna's words echoed in his mind. "I hear her crying at night, a soft, muffled cry." At 2 in the afternoon, he made up an excuse about feeling unwell and left. He drove home, his hands sweating on the steering wheel, telling himself there had to be a logical explanation for all of this. Maybe his mother really was sick, and because he was always traveling, he hadn't noticed how serious it was. But when he pulled into the garage and saw that Vivian's BMW wasn't there, he knew the moment of truth had arrived. Joanna was waiting for him in the kitchen, nervous, repeatedly wiping her hands on her apron. "Mr. Robert, thank God you're back. She left 10 minutes ago." "Joanna, I need you to tell me everything. From the beginning. When was the last time you actually saw my mother?" The housekeeper took a deep breath, as if she'd been carrying this weight for a long time. "It's been 3 weeks, Mr. Robert. 3 weeks since I've seen Mrs. Carman moving freely around the house. At first, Mrs. Vivian said she had a bad flu, that she couldn't leave her room, but then things started to get strange." "Strange how?" "The food I'd bring her would come back almost untouched. When I asked Mrs. Vivian about it, she'd say Mrs. Carman had no appetite because of the medicine. But Mr. Robert, your mother has always been a woman who ate well, even when she was grieving for Mr. Michael." Robert nodded. His father used to joke that one of the things he loved most about Carmen was her appetite for life, including food. "And then?" he asked. "Then Mrs. Vivian started locking the bedroom door. She said it was so Mrs. Carman could rest without being disturbed, but I found that odd, because whenever Mrs. Carman was sick, she liked me to be nearby, talking, keeping her company." Joanna paused and glanced toward the stairs, as if checking they were truly alone. "Go on, Joanna. I need to know everything." "One night, 2 weeks ago, I woke up thirsty and came to the kitchen. It was almost 3 in the morning. That's when I first heard the crying. It was coming from somewhere in the house, but I couldn't tell where. It was a quiet, desperate cry, like the person was trying not to make any noise." Robert felt a tightness in his chest. "Are you sure it was my mother?" "I am, Mr. Robert. I've known Mrs. Carman's voice for 25 years. It was her, but she sounded scared. Very scared. And you didn't try to find her?" Joanna lowered her head in shame. "I tried, Mr. Robert. But the next day, when I mentioned to Mrs. Vivian that I'd heard crying during the night, she got furious. She said I was making up stories, that maybe my age was affecting my hearing and my mind. She said if I kept spreading lies about the family, I'd be fired on the spot." "But you kept hearing the crying?" "Yes, almost every night, and there's more, Mr. Robert." Joanna hesitated, as if afraid he wouldn't believe her either. "Sometimes during the day, when Mrs. Vivian is out, I hear footsteps coming from upstairs. Slow, shuffling steps, like someone is having trouble walking." Robert felt his blood run cold. "Upstairs. But my mother's room is down here." "Exactly, Mr. Robert. That's why I was so confused. Whenever I hear those steps, I go up to check, but I never find anyone. All the rooms are empty, the doors locked." "Locked? Why?" "Mrs. Vivian said it was to keep the rooms tidy since they weren't being used. But, Mr. Robert, there's one room she never lets me clean anymore." "Which room?" "The old walk-in closet in the master suite, the one your mother used for storage. Mrs. Vivian said she was reorganizing that space and that I shouldn't worry about it." Robert knew that closet well. It was a large space his mother used to store old linens, Christmas decorations, photo albums, and other family keepsakes. When Vivian moved in after the wedding, she had claimed the master suite as theirs, and his mother hadn't objected. "Joanna, I'm going upstairs to take a look." "Mr. Robert, be careful. If Mrs. Vivian comes back and finds out..." "How long is she usually gone when she goes to the salon?" 2 hours, always. But today she also said she was going to stop by the mall to buy a few things." Robert took the stairs 2 at a time, with Joanna following nervously behind him. In the upstairs hallway, he stopped in front of the door to the closet. It was locked with a standard key, different from the other doors in the house. "Do you know where Vivian keeps this key?" "She always carries a set of keys in her purse, Mr. Robert, but I know there's an emergency copy in the drawer of her dresser." Robert went into the master bedroom, which had once been his parents', and opened the drawer Joanna had pointed to. There was a small ring with several keys. He tried them one by one, until he found the one that opened the closet door. What he saw when he opened the door made him take 2 steps back. The closet had been completely transformed. The old shelves had been removed, and in their place was a thin mattress on the floor, covered with a dirty sheet. Next to the mattress was a half-empty bottle of water and a plate with scraps of food that looked days old. The space was dark, with no proper ventilation, and there was an odor of confinement that made Robert feel nauseous. But what shocked him most were the marks on the walls, scratches, as if someone had tried to claw their way out. "Oh my God," Joanna murmured behind him, covering her mouth with her hands. Robert stepped into the cramped space and knelt beside the mattress. There were strands of grey hair on the makeshift pillow, and on the floor, almost hidden beneath the mattress, was a small, yellowed photograph. Robert picked it up with trembling hands. It was a picture of him as a child, sitting on his mother's lap. "She's being kept here, Joanna. My mother is being held prisoner. In this place." At that moment, they both heard the sound of a car pulling into the garage. "Mr. Robert, Mrs. Vivian is back." Joanna was in a panic. Robert quickly pocketed the photo, stepped out of the closet, and locked the door again. He put the key back in the drawer and ran downstairs, with Joanna right behind him. When Vivian walked in through the kitchen door, carrying shopping bags, she found Robert sitting at the table, pretending to read a newspaper, and Joanna making coffee. "Robert, you're back early. Are you feeling better?" "Yes, much better," he replied, surprised at his own ability to lie in that moment. "It was just a slight headache." Vivian smiled, but Robert noticed she was studying his face intently, as if looking for signs that he knew something. "That's good. Oh, and Robert, it might be best if you don't go upstairs today. I had some preventative pest control done in the unused rooms. The smell of the chemicals is really strong." Robert nodded, but inside he felt a rage building like never before. His mother was being held captive in her own home, and the woman he had married was spinning more and more elaborate lies to cover up the horror she was committing. The big question now was, where exactly was Mrs. Carmen at that moment, and how could he save her without alerting Vivian to his discovery? Because one thing had become crystal clear that afternoon. He was married to a woman capable of unimaginable cruelty, and his mother, the person he loved most in the world, was completely at her mercy. Robert lay awake all night, pretending to sleep next to Vivian. Her every breath sounded like a threat. Every shift on the mattress made him question how he could have been so blind for so long. The photo from his childhood burned in his mind, his mother smiling, holding him with the unconditional love she had always shown. And now she was being held prisoner in her own home. At 5 in the morning, certain that Vivian was sound asleep, Robert got up silently and went down to the kitchen. Joanna was already there, making breakfast with red, swollen eyes. "Did you get any sleep, Joanna?" "I couldn't, Mr. Robert. I just kept thinking about Mrs. Carmen. Where could she be now? Is she cold? Is she hungry?" Robert sat at the table, the weight of responsibility crushing him. "Joanna, I need you to help me understand something. If my mother was being kept in that closet, why wasn't she there yesterday when we looked?" "I have a theory, Mr. Robert, but it's going to sound very disturbing." "Tell me." Joanna looked around, making sure they were alone. "I think Mrs. Vivian moves Mrs. Carmen from place to place. Depending on who's home, what time it is, she moves your mother, so no one finds out." Robert felt a chill run down his spine. That would be calculated cruelty. "Mr. Robert, your wife is a very smart woman. She planned all of this. She never leaves obvious traces, always has an explanation ready, always manages to make anyone who questions her seem like they're overreacting or imagining things." Just then they both heard footsteps upstairs. Vivian was waking up. "Mr. Robert, if she suspects you know anything, I don't know what might happen to Mrs. Carmen." "What do you suggest?" "Act normal. Keep acting like you always do. I'll stay alert for any move she makes during the day and try to find out where. Your mother is being kept now." Robert nodded, but inside he felt like he was falling apart. How could he pretend everything was normal, knowing his mother was suffering? Vivian came down for breakfast, impeccably dressed, as always. "Good morning, honey. Sleep well?" "Yes, very well," Robert lied, watching every micro-expression on her face. "That's good. I have some news about your mother. Dr. Henry called last night and suggested she spend a few days at a nursing home. He said the clinical environment could help with her medication and the mental confusion she's been showing." Robert almost dropped his coffee cup. "A nursing home? My mother would never agree to that." "That's the point, Robert. She's not in a position to make rational decisions. The doctor was very clear. If we don't take proper care of her now, the situation could deteriorate rapidly." "I'd like to talk to her before we make any decisions." Vivian sighed, as if dealing with a stubborn child. "Robert, your mother had a crisis last night. She got very agitated, confused, didn't recognize me. I had to give her a sedative the doctor had prescribed for emergencies. She's still sleeping from the effects of the medication." Robert felt rage boiling inside him, but he forced himself to stay calm. "What kind of crisis?" "She started screaming that she wanted to leave the house, that someone was holding her prisoner. Obviously, they were delusions caused by her condition, but it was very distressing to see her like that." The cruel irony of that lie made Robert clench his fists under the table. His mother wasn't delusional. She was trying to call for help. "Where is she now?" "In her room, resting, but Robert, it's really best not to disturb her. Dr. Henry said that intense interactions can worsen the episodes of confusion." Robert finished his coffee in silence, said goodbye to Vivian with a forced kiss, and left for work. But instead of going to the office, he parked a few blocks away and called Joanna. "Joanna, as soon as Vivian leaves the house, call me. I'm coming back to look for my mother." "Mr. Robert, what if she doesn't leave today?" "Then I'll create a reason for her to leave." Robert called Vivian. "Honey, I just remembered you mentioned wanting a new dress for Friday's dinner party. Why don't you take the day and go to the mall? You can use my credit card, buy whatever you want." "How sweet of you to think of that, but I can't leave your mother alone, Robert." "Joanna's there, isn't she? She can keep an eye on things. You deserve a day to yourself." There was a pause. Robert could almost hear Vivian calculating whether it was safe to leave the house. "Well, maybe I could pop out for a bit. Just a few hours." An hour later, Joanna called. "Mr. Robert, she's gone. Said she'll be back at 4. Robert raced home like never before. He found Joanna waiting for him at the kitchen door, visibly nervous. "Where do we look first?" he asked. "The basement, Mr. Robert. There's a part of the basement I've never been able to check properly because Mrs. Vivian said it was dangerous due to the old electrical wiring." They went down to the basement together, a space Robert knew well from childhood but rarely visited as an adult. The front section was normal. Gym equipment, some boxes of Christmas decorations, his father's old tools. But in the back there was a small door Robert didn't remember seeing before. "Has this door always been here, Joanna?" "Yes, Mr. Robert, but it's always been locked. Your mother once told me it was just a storage room for very old things, that even she didn't have a key." Robert tried the door. It was locked, but the lock set looked like it had been recently replaced. The metal was shiny, unlike the rest of the aged frame. "Joanna, are there any tools down here?" They found a crowbar among his father's tools. With some effort, Robert managed to force the lock. What he found on the other side made him feel physically ill. It was a small, stuffy space with no proper ventilation. On the floor, a thin mattress with soiled sheets, a nearly empty water bottle, a bucket that was clearly being used as a makeshift toilet, and in the corner, huddled like a frightened child, was his mother. Mrs. Carman was unrecognizable. Her hair, always impeccably styled, was matted and dirty. She had lost a lot of weight. Her clothes hung loosely on her frail body. But what shocked Robert most were her eyes. Eyes that had always sparkled with life and determination now looked dull, filled with fear. When she saw Robert, she shrank further, into the corner, as if she couldn't believe he was really there. "Mom." Robert knelt slowly, trying not to frighten her more. "It's me, Robert, your son. I've come to get you out of here." Mrs. Carman looked at him for a few seconds in silence, as if testing if he was real. Then, in a hoarse, barely audible voice, she murmured, "Robert, you came? I thought you'd forgotten me." "Never, Mom. I would never forget you. What did she do to you?" Tears began to stream down Mrs. Carman's aged face. "She said you didn't want to see me anymore, that I was a burden, that if I told anyone anything, something bad would happen to you." Robert felt a fury he had never experienced in his life. "That's a lie, Mom. All of it. I've always wanted you with me. Always. She gives me medicine that makes me confused. Sometimes I don't even know what time it is, what day it is. And when I tried to scream for help, she said she'd take me somewhere even worse." Joanna, who had remained silent until then, came closer. "Mrs. Carmen, you're safe now. Mr. Robert is here." Mr. Robert helped his mother to her feet, feeling how weak and shaky she was. "Mum, we're getting out of here for good." But as they climbed the stairs and reached the kitchen, they heard the sound of a car pulling into the garage. Vivian was back early. "Mr. Robert, quick! What do we do?" Joanna whispered in a panic. Robert looked at his mother, then at the door to the garage, knowing that in a few seconds Vivian would walk in and discover her terrible secret had been exposed, and he had no idea how far she was willing to go to protect her lies. Robert felt time freeze. The sound of Vivian's key in the lock echoed through the house like a gunshot. Mrs. Carmen, still frail and confused, clung to her son's arm with desperate strength, her eyes filling with pure terror. "She can't see me here," she whispered hoarsely. "Robert, please," she said, "if anyone found me." "It's okay, Mom. She's never going to hurt you again," Robert said, but his own voice was trembling. He glanced around quickly, searching for a solution. The kitchen offered no hiding places, and Vivian would be through that door in seconds. "Joanna, take my mother to your room, quick." Joanna nodded and gently guided Mrs. Carmen down the back hallway, while Robert forced himself to sit at the kitchen table, picking up a newspaper and trying to control his racing heart. The door opened, and Vivian walked in carrying several shopping bags, her face lit up with a smile that Robert now saw as completely fake. "Robert, what a surprise to see you home. I thought you were at the office." "I got a terrible migraine and decided to come home early," he lied, forcing himself to sound normal. Vivian set the bags on the counter, but Robert noticed her eyes scanning the kitchen, as if she sensed something was different. "That's strange. It looks like someone's been in the kitchen besides Joanna. It smells different." Robert felt cold sweat trickle down his back. The smell of confinement and filth clinging to his mother might have lingered in the air. "I didn't notice anything," he replied, pretending to read the paper again. "Where's Joanna?" "I think she went to do something in her room." "Why?" Vivian didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked through the kitchen in a calculated way, observing every detail. She stopped in front of the sink and touched the faucet. "How odd. It's wet, but Joanna always dries everything after she uses it." Robert's heart was pounding so hard, he was sure Vivian could hear it. They had given his mother water to drink, and she had quickly washed her hands and face in the kitchen sink. "Vivian, you're being paranoid. It's just a faucet." She turned to him with a look Robert had never seen before. Cold, calculating, dangerous. "Robert, how long have you been home?" "I just got here. Why are you interrogating me?" "I'm not interrogating you. I'm just trying to understand why the house feels different." At that moment, a nearly inaudible noise came from the back hallway, probably Joanna trying to get Mrs. Carmen settled in her room. Vivian stiffened. "What was that noise?" "I didn't hear anything." "Robert, are you sure you just got here?" "I'm sure, Vivian. Why are you acting so strangely?" She studied him for a few seconds in silence. Robert forced himself to hold her gaze, but he could feel that she was getting suspicious. "I'm going to check on your mother," Vivian said, heading toward the hallway. "Isn't she better? You said she was sedated." Vivian stopped and turned slowly. "I did. But sedatives have a limited duration, Robert. I need to check if she needs more medication." Robert felt a chill. More medication. How many times had his mother been drugged to keep her submissive and silent? "I'll go with you," he said, standing up. "That's not necessary. You know how agitated she gets when she sees too many people. She's my mother, Vivian." "Exactly. And that's why I trust my judgment about what's best for her." The tension in the air was palpable. Robert realized he had reached a point of no return. He either confronted Vivian now, or he would lose his mother forever. "Vivian, where exactly is my mother sleeping?" The question caught her off guard. "What do you mean, where?" "In her room, obviously." "I checked her room this morning. The bed hadn't been used." Vivian's face paled slightly, but she recovered quickly. "Robert, your mother has been having restless nights. Sometimes I move her to the guest room so she can have more privacy during her episodes." "What episodes, Vivian? My mother has never had episodes in her life." "Your mother is getting older, Robert. You haven't been here to see her decline, I have. I'm the one who takes care of her every single day." "Take care of her?" The words dripped with sarcasm before Robert could stop himself. "Is that what you call what you've been doing to her?" Vivian stood motionless. "What are you talking about?" Robert knew there was no turning back. "I'm talking about the closet upstairs. I'm talking about the basement. I'm talking about holding a 78-year-old woman prisoner in her own home." The silence that followed was deafening. Vivian stared at him, without blinking, and Robert could see the exact moment she realized her lies had been discovered. "Robert," she said calmly, but her voice had lost all its artificial sweetness. "You don't understand the situation." "I don't understand." "Enlighten me, then. Explain how locking my mother in unventilated spaces, drugging her and keeping her isolated, can be considered care." "Your mother is sick, Robert, sicker than you can imagine. She has violent episodes, tries to leave the house in the middle of the night. Sometimes she doesn't even recognize me. Everything I did was to protect her." "Protect her? Or silence her?" Vivian took a step toward Robert, and he could see something dangerous glinting in her eyes. "Your mother never accepted me, Robert. From the day we got married, she tried to push me away from you. She saw me as an intruder, a usurper. When things became difficult to manage, I took the necessary measures." "Necessary measures? You call psychological torture necessary measures?" "I call it survival." The mask finally fell completely. "Do you think it's easy living in the shadow of a saint? Your mother, your deceased wife, they were always the perfect ones in the story. And I was always the villain. Well, if that's how you see me, then that's how I'll act." Robert felt sick to his stomach. "You're insane. Completely insane." "I'm pragmatic. Your mother was going to die in a few years anyway. I just sped up the process of her becoming irrelevant in our lives." "Where is she now?" "Somewhere safe." "Vivian, where is she?" "Somewhere safe," she repeated, crossing her arms, "and she'll stay there until we decide what to do about the situation." Robert took a step toward her, his anger finally overpowering his shock. "There is no we in this decision. I'm getting my mother now." "No, you're not." Vivian pulled her phone from her pocket. "One call from me, and an ambulance will be here to pick up your mother for a psychiatric emergency. I have months of medical documentation on her deteriorating mental state. I have recordings of her supposedly having violent episodes. I have the word of Dr. Henry, who is a longtime friend of mine, attesting that she is a danger to herself." Robert felt the floor drop out from under him. "You forged all of that. I proved that your mother needs specialized care. And when she's permanently institutionalized, this house will finally be ours. Just ours." At that moment, Robert heard faint footsteps from the hallway. Mrs. Carman had managed to leave Joanna's room and was slowly making her way toward the kitchen, leaning against the wall. When Vivian saw her, her face contorted with pure rage. "How did you get out of there?" she screamed, advancing toward the elderly woman. "I told you to stay put." Robert put himself between them. "Don't you come near her." "Get out of the way, Robert. You don't understand what she's capable of when she has these episodes." But Mrs. Carman, though weak, found the strength to speak. "Robert, my son, she gave me shots. Medicine that made me forget everything. She said you had asked me to disappear from your life." Robert looked at Vivian, who was visibly panicked at having lost control of the situation. "That's right, Mom. Tell him all your senile fantasies. Let's see who he believes, his wife or a confused, medicated old woman." It was in that moment that Robert realized his fight wasn't just about saving his mother. It was about proving the truth against a system of lies, so elaborate it could destroy Mrs. Carman's life forever. Robert wrapped his arms around his mother, feeling her tremble against his chest. Mrs. Carman was even more fragile than he had imagined, and the fear in her eyes was devastating to see. He could feel each of her ribs through her clothes, clear evidence of the neglect and deprivation she had suffered. "Mum, you're safe now. I won't let anyone hurt you," he murmured in her ear. But he kept his eyes fixed on Vivian, who watched them like a predator calculating its next move. "Robert," Vivian said, her voice now completely cold and controlled. "You're making a terrible mistake. Your mother needs professional medical help. Look at her. She's clearly delusional and malnourished from refusing to eat properly." "Refusing to eat?" Robert nearly shouted. "You kept her locked in a basement." "I tried to care for her in every way possible, but she became aggressive, violent. She even tried to physically attack me. I had to take measures to protect all of us." Just then, Joanna appeared in the hallway, having clearly heard the argument. Her eyes were wide with terror, but she approached with determination. "That's a lie!" Joanna exclaimed, surprising everyone with the force in her voice. "Mrs. Carmen has never been violent in her life. She's the sweetest person I've ever known." Vivian turned to the housekeeper with a murderous glare. "Joanna, you are interfering in family matters. I suggest you go back to your duties." "I won't stay silent anymore, Mr. Robert. I saw everything. I saw when she drugged your mother. I saw when she dragged her to those horrible places. Mrs. Carmen begged me for help, but I was too scared to do anything." "You're fired," Vivian said coldly, "and I'll make sure you never work again spreading these lies about me." "Joanna isn't going anywhere," Robert interjected, "and neither is my mother. You'll both stay under my protection while I sort this out." Vivian laughed, a bitter, cruel sound. "Your protection? Robert, you really don't grasp the gravity of the situation, do you? I've spent months documenting your mother's erratic behavior. I have videos of her supposedly having aggressive episodes. I have detailed medical reports. When I call for a psych hold, they're going to come for a woman who clearly poses a danger to herself and others. Fake videos, forged reports. Prove it, Robert. Prove that a respected woman in society, married to a successful businessman, would invent such an elaborate story about her mother-in-law. Who's going to believe a housekeeper and a 78-year-old woman who is clearly in a deteriorated mental state?" Robert felt despair creeping in. Vivian was right about one thing. She had built a very convincing narrative, but he needed concrete evidence to prove the truth. "Mom," he said gently, "do you remember anything specific that Vivian did? Anything we can prove?" Mrs. Carmen looked at him, her eyes still clouded by the drugs. She gave me shots, said they were vitamins, but they made me so sleepy and confused. And there's a drawer in her room where she keeps syringes and little bottles." Vivian paled. "She's delusional, Robert. She can't even form a coherent thought." "Joanna," Robert said, "have you ever seen these syringes?" "I have, Mr. Robert. Several times I saw Mrs. Vivian go upstairs with a small case. And when Mrs. Carmen got very agitated from being locked up, she'd come down saying she had calmed your mother." "These are very serious accusations," Vivian said, but Robert could see she was losing her composure. "And completely false. Then you won't mind if we go check that drawer right now?" "Robert, that's an invasion of my privacy. I'm your wife. You should trust me." "Trust ended the moment I found my mother locked in a basement." Robert helped his mother sit in a kitchen chair and motioned for Joanna to stay with her. "I'm going upstairs to check the room." "No, you're not." Vivian stood between him and the stairs. "Not without a warrant. It's my house, Vivian. It's our house, and the bedroom is my private space." Robert realized she was desperate to stop him, which only confirmed there was something incriminating in the room. "So you admit you have something to hide?" "I admit I have a right to privacy." At that moment, Mrs. Carmen tried to stand, but she was too weak. Joanna rushed to help her, and as the elderly woman leaned on the housekeeper, she whispered something in her ear. "Mr. Robert," Joanna said urgently, "your mother wants to say something important." Robert went over and knelt beside the chair. "What is it, Mum?" "The shots. She always gave them to me after dinner, and I saw—" She wrote things down in a notebook, a black notebook she kept under the mattress. Robert looked at Vivian, who was now in a full-blown panic. "What notebook is that, Vivian?" "Your mother is confused. There's no notebook." "Then there's no problem with me checking." Robert started up the stairs, but Vivian followed, trying to block him. "Robert, stop! You're destroying our marriage over the fantasies of a senile old woman. Our marriage was over the moment you laid a finger on my mother." In the bedroom, Robert went straight to the dresser he knew well. Vivian tried to stand in his way, but he firmly pushed her aside. In the top drawer, just as his mother had described, he found new syringes, vials of medication with labels he didn't recognize, and a small medical case. "Robert, I can explain all of this." But he wasn't listening. He lifted the mattress on her side of the bed, and there it was, a small black leather-bound notebook. Robert opened it and felt his blood run cold. It was a detailed log of Mrs. Carmen's treatment sessions. Vivian had documented every drug administered, every reaction from the elderly woman, every change of accommodation when she tried to resist. October 15th, administered extra sedation after escape attempt. Patient moved to basement confinement until calm. October 22nd, increased dosage of haloperidol. Patient showing less resistance to location changes. November 3rd, episode of excessive crying. Double injection administered. Patient unconscious for 18 hours. Robert read on with growing horror. These weren't legitimate medical notes. They were records of systematic torture. "Vivian, this is evidence of kidnapping and assault. It's evidence that I was trying to care for a very difficult woman." Robert ran downstairs, carrying the notebook and the medical case. Joanna and his mother looked at him hopefully. "Mum, is there anything else you remember? Anything that can help?" Mrs. Carmen closed her eyes, concentrating. There are pictures. She took pictures of me when I was very sick. She said she needed to document my erratic behavior for the doctors." Vivian had come downstairs and was now watching them from the hallway, but Robert noticed she was different, calmer, dangerously calm. "Robert," she said, pulling her phone from her pocket, "you have 10 seconds to give me back that notebook and stop this madness, or I'm calling for a psych hold, and telling them your mother had a violent episode that resulted in me being injured." "What injuries? You don't have any injuries." Vivian smiled coldly, and before everyone's horrified eyes, scratched her own arm with her nails until it bled. "I do now." Robert realized he was dealing with someone far more dangerous than he had imagined. Vivian wasn't just cruel. She was calculating to the extreme and willing to hurt herself to frame a defenseless old woman. 5 seconds, Robert, or your mother spends the rest of her life in a psychiatric institution, drugged until she can't even remember her own name. Robert looked at Vivian's bleeding arm, then at his frail, terrified mother, and finally at the notebook in his hands. Time seemed to stand still, but he knew that every second of hesitation could mean the difference between saving his mother and losing her forever. 3 seconds, Vivian counted, her finger already hovering over the emergency number. "Wait." Robert held up a hand. "Before you make that call, I want to understand one thing. Why? Why do this to a defenseless woman who never did anything to you?" Vivian hesitated, the phone still in her hand. "Your mother did hurt me, Robert. Every single day since we got married. Hurt you how? She was always respectful to you." "Respectful?" Vivian laughed bitterly. "She tolerated me. She smiled to my face, but I could see in her eyes that I would never be good enough for her precious son. Always comparing me to Marina, always making it clear I was a second-rate replacement." Robert frowned, confused. "My mother never said anything like that. She didn't have to. It was obvious in every look, every gesture. When you were away on business, she barely spoke to me. When I tried to change something in the house, she'd sigh like I was desecrating a holy temple. And she always talked about Marina as if she were a saint." "Vivian, that doesn't justify—" "Yes, it does." Her voice rose, revealing years of pent-up resentment. "I married you thinking I'd finally have a family, a place to belong. But I found out I was living in a house of ghosts. The ghost of your father, the ghost of Marina, and a woman who made it her mission to remind me daily that I would never be part of the real Miller family." Mrs. Carmen, who had been silent, found the strength to speak. I never wanted you to feel that way. I always tried to be kind." "Kind?" Vivian turned on her, hatred in her eyes. "You were condescending. You treated me like an unwelcome guest in my own home." Robert realized he was seeing a side of Vivian she had hidden for their entire marriage. The resentment, the envy, The feeling of inadequacy. It had all festered in silence until it turned into something monstrous. Even if that were true, Robert said, it didn't give you the right to torture an elderly woman. Torture. I was just creating a more harmonious environment for our marriage, without constant interference, without silent judgments, without ghosts from the past. Just then, the house landline rang. Everyone jumped. Robert hesitated, but Joanna approached the phone. "Miller residence," she said, her voice trembling. "Ah, Joanna." A familiar voice came from the other end. It was Dr. Henry. "How is Mrs. Carmen today? I was just calling to see if she needed any adjustments to her medication." Robert looked at Vivian, who had gone pale. If Dr. Henry was really in on her scheme, this call could be her undoing. But if he wasn't... "Dr. Henry?" Robert took the phone from Joanna. "This is Robert Miller." "Robert, good to hear your voice. Your wife told me you've been traveling a lot and that your mother was going through a difficult time. I wanted to schedule a visit with her to see how she's responding to the new treatment." Robert felt a flicker of hope. "Dr. Henry, did you prescribe any new medication for my mother recently?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "No, Robert, I haven't prescribed anything for Carmen in months. In fact, the last time I saw her, about 2 months ago, she was doing very well for her age. Why do you ask?" Robert looked at Vivian, who was now visibly desperate. "Dr. Henry, I need you to come over right now. It's an emergency." "Of course, Robert, I'm on my way. Did something happen to your mother?" "Doctor, when you get here, please bring a kit to draw blood for a toxicology screen." "Toxicology? Robert, what's going on?" "I suspect my mother is being poisoned." The silence on the other end was long. "I'll be there in 15 minutes." Robert hung up and turned to Vivian. "Well, it seems Dr. Henry wasn't in on your plan after all." "Robert, you don't understand." Vivian was panicking now. "Everything I did was to protect us." "Protect us from what?" "From a 78-year-old woman who just wanted to live in peace in her own home. Protect our marriage, protect our happiness. She was going to tear us apart, Robert. She would have found a way to make you choose between me and her, and we both know who you would have chosen." Robert looked at his mother, who was now crying silently, and felt a profound sadness. "I never would have had to choose, Vivian. A wife who truly loved me would have found a way to live in peace with my family." "Your family is dead, Robert. Your father is dead. Marina is dead. All that's left is an old woman who lives in the past and you who's never gotten over your losses." The cruelty of those words echoed through the kitchen. Joanna went to Mrs. Carmen and gently hugged her, whispering words of comfort. Robert knew he had to act fast. In 15 minutes, Dr. Henry would arrive and could confirm his suspicions about the illegal drugs Vivian was administering. But until then, she might try something desperate. "Vivian, give me your cell phone." "Why?" "Because I don't trust you to even breathe near my mother anymore." "Robert, you're making a terrible mistake. I can still fix this. I can make your mother well again. I can make her like me. We can be a happy family." The desperation in Vivian's voice was palpable, but Robert could see she was still calculating, still looking for a way out that would preserve her version of events. "The only thing you can do now is stay quiet and wait for the doctor." "And then, what happens then, Robert?" "Then you're going to answer for everything you did to my mother. You're going to ruin our lives over a woman who's only going to live a few more years and then leave you anyway. You're going to throw away our marriage, our stability, our future." Robert looked at her with a mixture of pity and disgust. "You threw away our marriage the first day you touched my mother. All I'm doing now is acknowledging that I married a stranger." Vivian moved closer to him, trying one last gambit. "Robert, I know you loved me. I know you still love me. We can get through this. I can get help, go to therapy, learn to deal better with complex family situations." "Complex family situations?" Robert nearly screamed. "You call locking my mother in a basement a complex family situation? I call it a moment of weakness that can be fixed." Just then, they heard a car pull up in front of the house. Dr. Henry had arrived earlier than expected. "Robert," Vivian said quickly, "last chance. You have 10 seconds to decide if you want to save our marriage or destroy our lives." Robert looked at his mother, who was watching him with eyes full of hope and fear. He looked at Joanna, who had risked her job to protect a defenseless woman. And finally, he looked at Vivian. the woman who had promised to love and protect, and who had revealed herself to be capable of unimaginable cruelty. The doorbell rang. Dr. Henry was at the door. "My decision is already made," Robert said, walking toward the door. "And it's been the same since the moment I found my mother, in that basement." But when he opened the door, he didn't just find Dr. Henry. There were also two men in dark uniforms that Robert didn't recognize. "Mr. Robert Miller," one of them asked, "we received a psychiatric emergency call from this residence." Robert felt his blood run cold. Vivian had managed to make the call without him realizing. Robert felt the world crumble as he saw the two psychiatric paramedics at his door. Behind them stood Dr. Henry, a confused expression on his face as he took in the scene. "There's been a mistake," Robert said quickly. "I didn't call for a psychiatric emergency." "You weren't the one who called, sir," replied one of the paramedics, a stocky man in his 40s. "It was your wife, Vivian Miller. She reported that your mother, Carmen Miller, 78, was having a violent psychotic episode and had injured her." Robert turned to see Vivian behind him, holding out her scratched arm as evidence. She had put on a makeshift bandage and adopted a victim's posture that Robert had to admit was convincing. "Dr. Henry," Robert said quickly, "you need to know that my mother has been held captive in this house. I have proof." Dr. Henry frowned, looking back and forth between Robert and Vivian. "Robert, what is going on here?" "Doctor," Vivian approached, tears in her eyes, "I called the paramedics because I didn't know what else to do. Robert's mother has been having increasingly violent episodes. Today she physically attacked me when I tried to give her medication." "What medication?" Dr. Henry asked. "I haven't prescribed any new medication for Mrs. Carmen." Vivian hesitated for a fraction of a second, but recovered quickly. "It was medication she was already taking, doctor. For anxiety. You said she could continue taking." "It has needed." Robert saw his opening. "Dr. Henry, how long has it been since you've seen my mother in person?" "About 2 months, Robert. Why?" "Because she's in this kitchen right now, and I'd like you to assess her condition." The paramedics followed Robert into the kitchen, where they found Mrs. Carmen still seated, supported by Joanna. The elderly woman's condition was shocking, far too thin, with sunken eyes, visible tremors, and a posture of fear she couldn't hide. Dr. Henry approached immediately. "Mrs. Carmen, it's me, Dr. Henry. Do you remember me?" The elderly woman looked at him with difficulty trying to focus. "Dr. Henry? Yes, you took care of Michael." "That's right. May I examine you quickly?" Dr. Henry knelt beside Mrs. Carmen and began a basic assessment, checking her eyes, her pulse, observing the tremors. His expression grew increasingly grave. "Robert," he said in a low voice, "your mother is clearly dehydrated and malnourished, and these tremors, they're consistent with either medication withdrawal or drug toxicity." "Doctor," Vivian interjected, "she hasn't been eating properly for weeks. She refuses to eat because of her mental confusion." "That's a lie," Joanna finally burst out. "I cooked for her every day, but Mrs. Vivian wouldn't let me bring her the food. She said Mrs. Carmen was fasting to improve her digestion." The paramedics exchanged a look. This situation was clearly more complicated than a simple psychiatric emergency. Robert seized the moment. "Dr. Henry, I need to show you a few things." He grabbed the black notebook and the medical case he'd found in the bedroom. "I found these in my wife's room." Dr. Henry opened the notebook, and his expression changed drastically as he read. "Robert, these are records of controlled substances being administered. Haloperidol, lorazepam, midazolam. These are drugs that can only be prescribed by a physician and administered under supervision." "I never prescribed these," he said, turning to Vivian. "Where did these medications come from?" Vivian was visibly panicking. I got them from a private doctor." The situation was getting out of control. "What doctor?" Dr. Henry asked sternly. I can't remember the name right now." One of the paramedics approached Robert. "Sir, we need to clarify something. Who exactly is in crisis here? Because from what I'm seeing, the elderly lady looks more like a victim of abuse than an aggressor." "Exactly," Robert said. "My mother was held prisoner in this house for weeks. Vivian drugged her to keep her submissive and locked her in spaces without proper ventilation. "Those are very serious accusations," the paramedic said. "Do you have evidence?" Robert showed them the notebook, the medical case, and then led them all to the basement, showing them the space where he had found his mother. Dr. Henry examined the area and shook his head in horror. "This is a scene of severe abuse and neglect. Robert, your mother needs immediate medical attention, but not psychiatric. She needs hydration, proper nutrition, and detoxification from the drugs that were illegally administered." "Doctor," Vivian tried one last time, "you don't understand how aggressive she would get." "Mrs. Miller," the older paramedic interrupted, "based on our experience and what we're seeing here, the person who needs a psychiatric evaluation isn't the elderly woman, it's you." "What do you mean?" "What you've done constitutes kidnapping, elder abuse, and illegal administration of controlled substances. These are serious crimes." Vivian looked around, realizing she had completely lost control of the situation. "You don't understand. I was trying to take care of her. She was becoming impossible to manage." "Manage?" Dr. Henry stood up, clearly outraged. "Mrs. Carmen is not a thing to be managed. She is an elderly person who deserves dignity and proper care." Robert went to his mother and gently took her hand. "Mum, Dr. Henry is going to take care of you now. He's going to take you to the hospital so you can get your health back." "And then?" Mrs. Carmen asked in a weak voice. Can I come home?" Robert looked around, at Vivian, who was now being questioned more intensely by the paramedics, at Joanna, who was crying with relief, at Dr. Henry, who was preparing his mother for transport to the hospital. "Yes, Mum, you can come home to your home, and this time it will really be your home again." But as the paramedics prepared Mrs. Carmen for transport, Robert realized that while the immediate crisis was being resolved, there would be lasting consequences for everyone involved. Vivian wasn't just losing an argument, she was losing her freedom. His mother wasn't just being saved, she would have to recover from deep physical and psychological trauma. And he himself wasn't just discovering the truth, he was discovering that he had failed to protect the most important person in his life when she needed him most. Dr. Henry approached him. "Robert, your mother will be hospitalized for a few days for detox and nutritional recovery, but physically, she should make a full recovery. And psychologically? That will take more time. The trauma of what she's been through, she'll need support, affection, patience. But Carmen has always been a strong woman. With the right care, I believe she can overcome this." Robert nodded, feeling a mix of relief and guilt. "Doctor, how did I not see this? How did I let this happen right under my nose?" "Robert, people like your wife are extremely manipulative. They know how to hide their actions and present convincing versions of reality. The important thing is that you found out in time." But as Robert looked at the devastated state of his mother being carried out on a stretcher, he wondered if he had really found out in time, or if it was already too late to repair some of the damage Vivian had done to the woman who raised him with so much love and dedication. 3 weeks had passed since Mrs. Carmen was hospitalized. Robert practically lived at the hospital, leaving only to handle legal matters and take care of the affairs Vivian had left behind when she was taken into police custody. His mother's physical recovery was progressing well. The illegal drugs had been flushed from her system, she was eating again, and she was gradually gaining weight. But the emotional recovery was more complex. Mrs. Carmen still woke up startled during the night, still flinched when she heard footsteps in the hall, still asked repeatedly if she was safe. "Dr. Henry," Robert asked during one of the doctor's visits, "when will she be able to go home?" "Physically, she could be discharged already. But Robert, I'm concerned about the psychological impact of her returning to the same house where she was held prisoner." Robert had been thinking about this constantly. How could he bring his mother back to a place that had become a scene of so much suffering? "I'm thinking of selling the house," he said, "buying something smaller, cozier, a place where we can start fresh. That would be wise. Mrs. Carmen needs to feel safe to continue her recovery." That same day, Robert received a call from the lawyer handling Vivian's case. The charges were severe kidnapping, elder abuse, illegal administration of controlled substances, and neglect. The evidence was overwhelming. The notebook, the photos found on Vivian's phone documenting Mrs. Carmen's deteriorating state, and the testimonies of Joanna and Dr. Henry. "Mr. Miller," the lawyer said, "your wife is attempting to plead temporary insanity. She claims she was overcome by a pathological jealousy and lost her sense of right and wrong." "And do you believe that?" "No. The level of planning, the meticulous documentation, the prolonged manipulation, it all points to premeditation and full awareness of her actions. She knew exactly what she was doing." Robert felt a mix of relief and sadness. Relief that Vivian would be held accountable, but sadness that he had genuinely loved a woman who turned out to be capable of unimaginable cruelty. During his hospital visits, Robert began to better understand what his mother had endured. She recounted fragments of memories that were slowly returning, the forced injections that left her disoriented for days, the terror of waking up locked in dark, cramped spaces, the constant hunger, thirst, and cold. "Son," she said one afternoon, holding his hand, "I thought you had forgotten me. Vivian kept saying you had asked her to take care of me because I was getting in the way of your new life." Robert felt his heart break. "Mom, I would never ask for that. I would never even think that. You are the most important person in my life." "I know that now. But in those dark moments, when I was confused from the drugs, when I couldn't think straight, I believed her. I thought I had become an unwanted burden." "You were never a burden, Mom. You never will be. And I'm so sorry I didn't see what was happening." "Robert, you couldn't have known. She was very smart, very careful to hide what she was doing." During one of these conversations, his mother mentioned something Robert didn't expect. "You know, son, part of me understands why she did it." Robert was shocked. "What do you mean?" "Vivian felt rejected, inadequate. I saw it in her eyes in the first few months of your marriage. She was trying to fit into our family, but I don't think I knew how to help her feel welcome." "Mom, nothing you did or didn't do justifies what she did to you." "It doesn't justify it, no, but it helps me understand. Sometimes when people are desperate to belong, they do terrible things to get what they think they want." Robert was amazed by his mother's capacity for compassion, even for the person who had tortured her. Joanna visited the hospital every day. She felt extremely guilty for not having acted sooner to protect Mrs. Carmen. "Joanna," Robert said one day, "I want you to know that you will always be part of our family, and I want to give you a significant raise. What you did was heroic." "Mr. Robert, I didn't do anything heroic. I waited too long to speak up. You found your courage when it mattered most, and more importantly, you never abandoned my mother, even when you were threatened." Mrs. Carmen took Joanna's hand. "You saved me, Joanna. You were my protector when I had no one." The two women cried together, united by the trauma they had shared and the hope for better days. One morning, Robert arrived at the hospital to find his mother sitting in the armchair by the window, looking outside. She was wearing a new dress he had bought her. Her hair was combed, and for the first time in weeks she seemed truly present. "How are you feeling today, Mum?" "Better," she said, and Robert could see she truly meant it. "I've been thinking about the future." "What have you been thinking?" "That I want to live, Robert, really live. During those terrible weeks I thought that it was going to end there in those dark places. But now that I'm free, I realize I still have things I want to do, places I want to see, people I want to take care of." Robert smiled, feeling hopeful for the first time in weeks. "And what's the first thing you'd like to do when you get out of here?" "I want to cook. I want to cook your favorite meal, fill the new house with wonderful smells, get back to doing the things that bring me joy." "That would make me very happy, Mum. And Robert," she looked at him seriously, "I want you to know that I forgive you." "Forgive me for what?" "For not realizing what was happening sooner. I know you blame yourself, but you shouldn't. You trusted the wrong person, but that doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you human." Robert felt tears well up in his eyes. "I promise I will never let anything like this happen again." "Son," she said softly, "you can't control everyone around you, but you can choose better who you trust, and you can forgive yourself for past mistakes so you can build a better future." That afternoon, Dr. Henry delivered the news Robert had been waiting for. Mrs. Carman was ready to be discharged at the end of the week. But Robert, the doctor cautioned, a full recovery will take time. She'll need continued psychological support, patience, and a lot of love. She'll have all of that, Robert promised. And this time I'm going to be present. I won't let work or anything else stop me from taking proper care of her. But as the discharge day approached, Robert couldn't help but wonder. Would it be enough? After everything his mother had suffered, would it be possible to truly rebuild the trust, the security, the joy that Vivian had destroyed? Or would a shadow of those terrible days always haunt their future? 6 months later, Robert stood in the kitchen of their new house watching his mother prepare Sunday lunch. Home was smaller than their previous one, but infinitely warmer. It was in a quiet neighborhood with a garden that Mrs. Carman had turned into her personal sanctuary, filled with colorful flowers and aromatic herbs she used in her cooking. "Robert, can you go get Joanna for lunch?" Mrs. Carman said, stirring a sauce that smelled delicious. "And don't forget to call Dr. Henry. He said he'd stop by after lunch." Robert smiled. His mother had reclaimed not only her independence, but also her natural role as the family's caregiver. Joanna now lived with them in a comfortable room upstairs, no longer as a housekeeper, but as part of the family. She had become Mrs. Carman's daily companion, and the two had developed a deep friendship forged in shared adversity. Dr. Henry had become more than a doctor. He was a dear friend who joined them for lunch most Sundays, discreetly monitoring Mrs. Carman's recovery, while enjoying the delicious meals she insisted on making for him. "Mom," Robert said, "are you sure you don't want any help with that?" "Robert Miller, how many years have I been cooking without your help?" she replied, laughing. "Go do your thing and let me do mine." Robert watched his mother for a few moments. She had regained not just her physical weight and vitality, but something even more important, her joy for life. The sparkle was back in her eyes, her smile was genuine, and she moved through the house with the confidence of someone who knew she was truly home. The phone rang. It was Robert's lawyer with news about Vivian's case. "Mr. Miller," the voice on the other end said, "the trial concluded yesterday. Vivian was sentenced to 8 years in prison, in addition to fines and restitution for emotional damages and medical expenses." Robert felt a mix of relief and sadness. Justice had been served, but it was still hard to process that the woman with whom he had shared a life was capable of such cruelty. "And there's more," the lawyer continued. "During the final investigation, we discovered something that might interest you. Vivian had attempted something similar with her previous mother-in-law before she married you." Robert froze. "What do you mean?" "She was married before, for 2 years, to a businessman from Los Angeles. Her mother-in-law, an 82-year-old woman, developed sudden mental health issues during the time Vivian lived in the house. The family ended up putting the elderly woman in a facility where she passed away 6 months later. No one suspected a thing at the time." Robert felt nauseous. She killed someone before?" "We can't prove that, as the woman was cremated years ago. But the pattern of behavior is identical. Isolation of the victim, administration of unprescribed medication, creating a narrative of mental illness to justify institutionalization." Robert hung up the phone, his hands shaking. His mother had narrowly escaped a terrible fate. Mrs. Carman noticed his agitation. "Son, what is it?" Robert hesitated to tell her, but decided she had a right to know. He carefully recounted what the lawyer had discovered. To his surprise, his mother showed no shock or horror. Instead, she nodded thoughtfully. "I always felt there was something deeply wrong with her, Robert. It wasn't just jealousy or insecurity. It was something deeper, more dangerous." "Mum, if I had known I'd married someone like that—" "But you didn't know. And even if you had, it wouldn't have changed the fact that she was very good at hiding her true nature." Just then, Joanna entered the kitchen. "Mrs. Carman, can I help with anything?" "You certainly can, dear. Help me set the table. Dr. Henry will be here any minute." Robert watched the two women working together and realized something extraordinary. Despite all the trauma they had endured, they had found a way not just to survive, but to thrive. His mother wasn't living in fear. She was living with a renewed purpose. Joanna wasn't haunted by guilt. She was proud that she had found her courage when it mattered. Dr. Henry arrived promptly, as always, carrying flowers from his own garden for Mrs. Carman. "How is our favorite patient today?" he asked, kissing Mrs. Carman's hand chivalrously. "Better every day, doctor, and you?" During lunch, the conversation was lively and full of laughter. Dr. Henry told stories about his other patients, without breaking confidentiality, of course. Joanna shared news about the neighbors she'd met, and Mrs. Carman talked about her plans to expand the garden even further. "You know," she said, serving the dessert she had made, "I've been thinking about starting a cooking class for ladies my age. There are a lot of widows in the neighborhood who seem a bit lost in the kitchen." Robert smiled. His mother wasn't. Just recovering. She was finding ways to help others who might be going through similar struggles. "I think that's a wonderful idea, Mum." "And Robert," she looked at him fondly, "you need to stop blaming yourself for the past. You need to move on and be happy. I don't know if I'm ready to trust anyone again. Son, not everyone is like Vivian. There are good people in the world, people who know how to love without destroying. When you're ready, you'll find someone who deserves your trust." Dr. Henry agreed. "Robert, you're a good man who went through a traumatic experience, but you can't let fear stop you from living fully." After lunch, as they had coffee in the garden, Mrs. Carman made a revelation that surprised everyone. "I received a letter from Vivian last week." Robert tensed. What did she want? She asked for forgiveness. A long letter, talking about her difficult childhood, about how she always felt inadequate and rejected. She acknowledges that what she did was unforgivable, but she wanted me to know she was sorry. "And how do you feel about that?" Mrs. Carman thought for a moment. "I forgive her, Robert. Not because she deserves forgiveness, but because I deserve peace. Holding on to anger and resentment would only hurt me more." Robert was once again struck by his mother's wisdom and strength. "But that doesn't mean I trust her or think she should get out of prison," Mrs. Carman continued. "It just means I choose not to let hatred poison my heart." As the afternoon wore on and the shadows grew long in the garden, Robert looked around at the people he loved and who loved him back. His mother, radiant and strong, Joanna, loyal and brave, Dr. Henry, a true friend who had shown up at just the right time. He realized that, in a strange way, the terrible experience they had endured had made them an even closer family. They had discovered the true value of trust, of genuine care, and of the importance of being truly present in the lives of the people we love. "Mom," he said when Dr. Henry and Joanna went inside, "I love you so much." "I love you too, my son, and I want you to know that I'm grateful for everything we've been through." "Grateful? Even for the suffering?" "Grateful because it showed me who truly loves me and who is worth having around. Grateful because it taught me that I'm stronger than I ever imagined, and especially grateful because it brought me back to a life where I can truly live, not just exist." Robert hugged his mother, feeling a peace he hadn't experienced in a long time. The future was open before them, full of possibilities and surrounded by true love. In that flower-filled garden, under the golden late-afternoon sky, Robert finally understood that sometimes you have to walk through the deepest darkness to truly appreciate the light. And that real love, the love between family, between true friends, has the power not only to survive the greatest adversities, but to emerge even stronger and brighter on the other side. End of story. Hey everyone, we hope the story of Robert, Mrs. Carman, and Joanna touched your hearts. If you were moved by Robert's courage in fighting for his mother and Joanna's bravery in protecting a defenseless woman, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments what part of this story resonated with you the most. Every day we bring you intense stories like this one that reveal the deepest side of the human soul, showing that true strength lies in the family bonds we nurture, the importance of being present in the lives of those we love, and the ability to forgive to find inner peace. We'll see you in the next episode with another narrative that will stir your emotions and make you reflect on the values that truly matter in life.